The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Over 300 delegates from different species sat in their seats, their eyes fixed on the holographic display in the center of the room. The images showed a planet on fire. Cities were burning. Ships circled overhead like hungry birds, waiting for their prey to die. Ambassador Valthari of the Corvani fell to his knees. His body was made of crystal and light, beautiful and fragile like glass. His people had traveled the stars for thousands of years. They were traders, artists, and scientists. They had never built a weapon. They had never needed to. The laws of the galaxy protected them, but the Drachma did not care about laws. The Drachma were conquerors. They came from a harsh world where only the strong survived. They had spread across the galaxy like a disease, taking what they wanted, destroying what they did not need. Now they had come for Corvani Prime, and there was nothing the Corvani could do to stop them. "Please," Valthari said. His voice was weak. His translator made it sound even weaker. "We have called upon every member species. We have begged for help. The Thylosians say they cannot fight. The Mandari say they must remain neutral. The Arvax say our world is too far away." He looked around the chamber. Most of the delegates looked away. They were afraid. The Drachma were powerful, and no one wanted to make them angry. 12 billion of my people are waiting to die," Valthari continued. "Our children hide underground. Our elderly pray to gods who do not answer. We have 72 hours before the Drachma begin their ground assault. When that happens, there will be no survivors." In the back of the chamber, a group of delegates sat apart from the others. They were taller than most species. Their bodies were thick with muscle. Their skin showed scars from old battles. Their eyes were sharp and watchful. They were humans from Earth. Admiral Jake Morrison sat in the center of the human delegation. He was 53 years old. His hair was gray at the temples. A long scar ran down the left side of his face, a gift from a battle he had fought 20 years ago. He had commanded fleets, won wars, and buried too many friends. He listened to the Corvani ambassador with a face that showed nothing. Lieutenant Amy Chunbrook sat beside him. She was young, only 32, but she was one of the smartest officers in the fleet. She leaned close to Jake and spoke softly. "Sir, do you remember Theta 7? Jake nodded slowly. How could he forget? 10 years ago, a plague had struck the human colony on Theta 7. The disease spread fast. People were dying by the thousands. No other species would help because they were afraid of catching the sickness. But the Corvani came. They sent their medical ships. They worked day and night. They saved 40,000 human lives and asked for nothing in return. The Corvani saved our people," Amy said. "They did not have to. They just did it because it was right." Jake said nothing. He just watched the ambassador. Valthari's blue eyes moved across the chamber and stopped on the human delegation. For a moment, fear crossed his face. Humans were known throughout the galaxy. They came from Earth, a world so dangerous that most species could not survive there for even a single day. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was full of poison. The weather could kill in 100 different ways. And the creatures that lived there were nightmares made real. Earth was classified as a Category 12 death world. It was the highest and most dangerous classification possible. And humans were the only intelligent species to ever evolve on such a world. To the rest of the galaxy, humans were monsters. Valthari swallowed his fear and spoke directly to Jake. "We know what you are. We have heard the stories. Your people hunt for sport. You eat the flesh of other creatures. You survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, and predators that would terrify any other species. You are the children of a world that tried to kill you every single day, and you conquered it anyway." The chamber was completely silent now. Everyone was watching. "We are asking the monsters to save us from the monsters," Velthari said. "We know we have no right to ask. We know you owe us nothing. But I am begging you, please, help us." Jake stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, and the sound echoed through the hall. Every alien in the room flinched. To them, he looked like a predator rising from its rest. He walked down the steps toward the center of the chamber. His boots made heavy sounds on the stone floor. The other delegates moved away from him as he passed. They were afraid to be too close. Jake stopped in front of Velthari. The Kovanni ambassador looked up at him. Jake was twice his size. He could have broken the crystalline being with one hand. "How many ships do the Drachmar have?" Jake asked. His voice was calm and low. 600 warships. Their flagship alone is larger than anything in the galaxy. "And your defenses?" "We have none. We are not warriors. We never have been." Jake was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the 40,000 humans on Theta 7. He thought about the Kovanni doctors who had worked until they collapsed from exhaustion. He thought about kindness given freely, without expectation of reward. Then he thought about the Drachmar, who burned cities and killed children and believed that strength gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. He looked down at Velthari. "Tell your people to hold on. Tell them to stay strong. Tell them help is coming." Velthari's eyes went wide. "You will help us, truly?" "The Kovanni saved human lives when no one else would. We do not forget our debts, and we do not abandon our friends." Jake turned and walked back toward his delegation. Amy was already on her tablet, sending messages to Fleet Command. The other human officers were standing, ready to move. "Admiral," one of the alien delegates called out, "the Drachmar have 600 ships. What can you possibly do against such a force?" Jake stopped. He turned his head slightly and looked at the delegate with cold eyes. "We are going to show them what happens when you threaten people under human protection. We are going to teach them why the galaxy should fear us. And when we are done, the Drachmar will never hurt anyone again." He walked out of the chamber without another word. His officers followed. The galactic delegates sat in stunned silence. They had just watched something remarkable. The humans, the terrifying Deathworlders that everyone feared, had agreed to go to war for a species that could offer them nothing in return. Velthari remained on his knees, tears of light streaming down his crystalline face. For the first time in days, he felt something he had thought was lost forever. Hope. The message went out across human space at the speed of light. Priority Alpha. Full mobilization. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. The humans were going to war. Captain Ben Harper was sleeping when the alarm woke him. He had been dreaming of his home in Colorado, of mountains and rivers and clean air. But the dream faded fast when he saw the orders on his screen. He read them twice to make sure he understood. Then he got dressed and ran to the bridge of his ship. The Ironclad was a Devastator-class battleship. She was 3 kilometers long, made of reinforced titanium and ceramic armor. She carried railguns that could fire projectiles at a fraction of the speed of light. She had missile bays filled with nuclear warheads. She had point defense systems that could shoot down 1,000 incoming threats at once. She was one of the most powerful weapons humanity had ever built, and she was just one ship among many. Ben reached the bridge and found his crew already at their stations. His executive officer, Commander Grace Sullivan, turned to face him. She was a tall woman with red hair and green eyes. She had served with Ben for 7 years. He trusted her with his life. "What do we have?" Ben asked. "Full mobilization order from Admiral Morrison. We are to rendezvous with the main fleet at Rally Point Sigma. From there, we jump to Corvani Prime. How many ships?" Grace checked her screen. Last count was 147 combat vessels. More are being pulled from patrol and garrison duty every hour. Ben let out a low whistle. He had never seen a mobilization this large. Not even during the border wars. The Kovanni must be in serious trouble, he said. They are. The Drachmer have 600 ships in orbit around their planet. 12 billion civilians trapped below. Ben nodded. He did not know much about the Corvani. He knew they were peaceful, that they did not fight, that they had helped humanity once during a plague. That was enough. Get us moving, he ordered. I want the ironclad ready for combat by the time we reach the rally point. All across human space. Similar scenes were happening. On the carrier Leviathan, Commander Nathan Price was running final checks on his fighter squadron. The Leviathan carried 200 Raptor-class fighters, small and fast ships designed for precision strikes. Nathan was the best pilot in the fleet. He had shot down more enemy ships than anyone else in the service. His pilots looked up to him like a father. Listen up, Nathan told his squadron. This is not a drill. We are going into combat against a superior force. The Drachmer are tough, they are mean, and they think they are the biggest predators in the galaxy. He paused and looked at his pilots. They were young, most of them. Some had never seen real combat. They are wrong, Nathan continued. We are humans. We come from a world that kills everything that is not strong enough to survive. We are the deadliest species in the galaxy, and we are going to prove it. When we are done, the Drachmer will have nightmares about us for the rest of their lives. The pilots cheered Dot at a research station near Jupiter. Dr. Claire Donovan worked frantically in her weapons laboratory. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent her whole life designing weapons that she hoped would never be used. Now they were needed. She uploaded her latest designs to Fleet Command. New targeting systems. Improved shield-piercing ammunition. Experimental warheads that could bypass enemy defenses. She did not know if they would help, but she had to try. The Corvani had been kind to humanity. Claire remembered reading about Theta 7, about the plague, about the Corvani doctors who had worked until they died from exhaustion. She remembered thinking that such kindness was rare in the galaxy. Now, it was time to repay that kindness, and in the deepest part of Terran Defense Command, hidden beneath mountains of rock and layers of security, Admiral Jake Morrison stood before a ship that no one outside the highest levels of government knew existed. The Revenant. She was not just a warship. She was a weapon of last resort. She had been built in secret after the first contact wars, when humanity had almost been wiped out by hostile aliens. The leaders of Earth had decided that such a thing must never happen again. They had built a ship that could destroy anything. The Revenant was 5 kilometers long. Her hull was made from materials created in the hearts of dying stars. Her weapons could crack a planet in half. Her crew was selected from the most dangerous soldiers humanity had ever produced. She was death-given form. Jake walked along the hangar floor, looking up at the massive vessel. Amy walked beside him, her tablet filled with fleet reports. We have 162 ships confirmed for the mission, she said. More are still coming. We should have close to 200 by the time we reach the rally point. And the enemy? 600 Drachmer warships. Their flagship, the Annihilator, is the largest combat vessel ever built. It has enough firepower to destroy a fleet by itself. Jake nodded slowly. The numbers were not good. The humans were outnumbered 3-1, maybe more. Many of them would die in this battle, but that did not matter. What mattered was that the Corvani were counting on them. What mattered was that 12 billion innocent people were waiting for help that might never come. What mattered was that humanity had made a promise, and humans kept their promises. Wake the crew, Jake ordered. Tell them we deploy in 6 hours. Amy hesitated. Sir, The Revenant has never been tested in actual combat. We do not know if she will perform as designed. Then I guess we will find out. Jake placed his hand on the cold metal of the ship's hull. He could feel the power sleeping inside her, waiting to be unleashed. He thought about the Drachma, about their arrogance, about how they believed themselves to be the ultimate predators. They had never met humans. They had never faced a species that had crawled out of a world that tried to kill them every single day. They had never fought against people who refused to give up, who would rather die than surrender, who would burn the galaxy to ashes before they let their friends be destroyed. The Drachma thought. They were the monsters of the galaxy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Jake turned and walked toward the command center. There was much to do before the fleet departed. He had to review battle plans, coordinate with other captains, make sure every ship was ready for the fight ahead. But deep in his heart, he felt something he had not felt in years. Not fear, not doubt, not worry. Anticipation. The Drachma had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened a species under human protection. They had hurt people that humans cared about. And now they were going to pay for that mistake. The fleet was assembling. The weapons were ready. The soldiers were prepared to fight and die. The monsters of Earth were coming, and hell was coming with them. The human fleet tore through hyperspace like a storm of steel and fire. 183 warships moved together, their engines burning bright against the darkness between stars. They had left everything behind. Their homes, their families, their safe worlds. They were flying toward a battle that many of them would not survive, and not one of them hesitated. On the bridge of the Ironclad, Captain Ben Harper stood before a holographic display of the enemy fleet. The Drachma ships appeared as red dots, hundreds of them, circling the planet like wolves around a wounded deer. The planet itself glowed blue, a beautiful world filled with 12 billion people waiting to die. "Give me the full tactical report," Ben ordered. Lieutenant Kyle Reeves stepped forward. He was young, only 25, fresh out of the academy. His face was pale. This was his first real combat mission. "Sir, the Drachma have approximately 600 warships in the system. Their flagship, the Annihilator, is positioned at the center of their formation. It measures over 8 kilometers in length. Its main weapon can destroy a battleship with a single shot." Ben studied the display. The enemy formation was tight and disciplined. The Drachma knew what they were doing. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had fought and won countless battles. They were not afraid of anyone. "What about their ground forces?" Ben asked. "They've already landed advanced troops on the planet's surface. The Corvani are trying to fight back, but they have no weapons, no training, no military experience. Casualty reports are catastrophic. Millions have already died." Ben felt his hands tighten into fists. Millions dead. Innocent people who had never hurt anyone. Killed because the Drachma wanted their world. Commander Grace Sullivan stepped closer. "Sir, I have been studying Drachma combat tactics. They are aggressive and brutal. They attack in overwhelming numbers and never retreat. They do not take prisoners. Sounds like they think highly of themselves. They do. They come from a Category 8 world. Harsh conditions, dangerous predators, extreme weather. They believe this makes them the ultimate warriors. They have never lost a war." Ben allowed himself a small smile. "They have never fought humans." "No, sir, they have not." Aboard the carrier, Leviathan, Commander Nathan Price gathered his pilots in the briefing room. 200 young men and women sat before him, their flight suits already on, their helmets in their laps. They looked nervous. They looked determined. They looked like exactly what they were, warriors ready to fight. "Here is the situation," Nathan said. "We are outnumbered. The enemy is stronger, bigger, and more experienced. By every measure, we should not be able to win this fight." He paused, and looked at their faces. But we are not fighting for territory. We are not fighting for resources. We are not fighting for glory. We are fighting because 12 billion innocent people are going to die unless we stop it. We are fighting because the Kovani helped us when no one else would. We are fighting because that is what humans do. A pilot raised her hand. Her name was Jenny Parker, and she was one of the best in the squadron. Sir, what if we fail? Nathan's eyes were hard. Then we make sure the Drachma pay for every inch of ground. We make them bleed for every ship they destroy. We make them remember this day for the rest of their history. But we do not fail. We cannot fail. Because if we fail, those people down there have no one else. The pilots nodded. Fear was still in their eyes, but something else was there too. Resolve, purpose, the knowledge that they were about to do something that mattered. On the Revenant, Admiral Jake Morrison held his final briefing before the battle. His command staff sat around a long table, their faces lit by the glow of tactical displays. These were some of the best officers in the fleet. Captain Ethan Cole, who had once fought off an entire boarding party with nothing but a knife. Commander Larva Vance, the finest tactician in human space. Chief Engineer Danny Kim, who could make any machine do impossible things. Jake stood at the head of the table. His voice was calm and steady. The Drachma believed themselves to be apex predators. They evolved on a harsh world, survived through strength and violence, and conquered everyone they met. They look at the galaxy and see only prey. He pressed a button and an image appeared above the table. It was Earth, beautiful and blue, covered in oceans and clouds. But the images that followed told a different story. Volcanoes erupting with enough force to block out the sun. Ice ages that covered the world in frozen death. Hurricanes that could flatten cities. Predators with teeth and claws designed to kill. This is where we come from, Jake said. A world that spent billions of years trying to murder everything that lived on it. Every species on Earth evolved through constant warfare against the environment and each other. The weak died, the strong survived, and humans became the strongest of all. He looked at each of his officers in turn. The Drachma think they are monsters, but they have never met real monsters. They have never faced a species that hunted animals 10 times their size. They have never fought against people who crossed frozen wastelands and burning deserts just to survive. They do not know what it means to face a human in battle. Larva Vance spoke up. What are your orders, Admiral? We hit them fast and we hit them hard. No mercy, no hesitation. We show them exactly what happens when you threaten people under human protection. We teach them why the rest of the galaxy fears us. And when the battle is over, the survivors will carry that lesson back to their homeworld. They will tell stories about this day. They will warn their children and their children's children. Jake's eyes were cold as ice. The Drachma came here expecting easy prey. Instead, they found the Deathworlders of Sol 3. They woke up a sleeping monster. And that monster is very, very angry. The briefing ended. The officers returned to their posts. The fleet continued its journey through hyperspace, drawing closer to Kovani Prime with every passing minute dot in the darkness between stars. 183 human warships flew toward battle. The crews prepared their weapons. The pilots checked their fighters. The Marines loaded their rifles and sharpened their knives. They were afraid. Every single one of them was afraid. But they did not turn back. They did not slow down. They kept flying toward the enemy because that was what needed to be done. 12 billion Kovani were counting on them, and humans did not abandon their friends. The fleet burst out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kovani system. Before them, the enemy waited. 600 Drachma warships. The largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Jake Morrison looked at the enemy formation and smiled. All ships, he said into the fleet-wide channel, his voice steady and cold. "This is Admiral Morrison. You know why we are here. You know what we have to do. The Kovanni saved 40,000 of our people. Today, we repay that debt." He paused for just a moment. "All ships, engage." And the humans attacked. The void of space lit up with fire. The human fleet crashed into the Drachma formation like a hammer striking an anvil. Railguns fired, sending projectiles screaming across the darkness at impossible speeds. Missiles launched in swarms, their warheads glowing bright as they hunted for targets. Plasma beams cut through the emptiness, burning through shields and armor like hot knives through flesh. The Drachma had not expected this. They had conquered dozens of species. They had fought hundreds of battles. They had never seen anything attack them with such fury, such speed, such complete disregard for survival. The humans were not fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like wild animals defending their pack. On the bridge of the ironclad, Captain Ben Harper stood firm as his ship shook from enemy fire. Warning lights flashed red. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in from every section. "Forward shields at 60%, Commander Grace Sullivan reported. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. Damage control teams responding." "Keep firing," Ben ordered. "Target their command ships. Break their coordination." The ironclad's main batteries roared. Projectiles the size of cars launched from the railguns, crossing the distance to the enemy in heartbeats. A Drachma cruiser tried to evade, but it was too slow. The rounds punched through its shields and tore its hull apart. The ship exploded in a ball of orange fire. "Target destroyed," Kyle Reeves called out. "Acquiring next target." "Sir, enemy formation is adjusting," Grace said. "They are bringing their heavy ships forward." Ben looked at the tactical display. The Drachma were regrouping. Their initial shock was fading. Now they were starting to fight back with their full strength. "Then we hit them harder," Ben said. "Signal the fleet. Concentrate fire on their battleships. Do not let them reform their line." Across the battlefield, Commander Nathan Price led his fighter squadron into the heart of the enemy fleet. His Raptors streaked through space, dodging plasma bolts and debris with expert precision. Around him, his pilots followed, their ships moving like a swarm of deadly insects. "Fox 1 away," Nathan called as he launched a missile at a Drachma destroyer. The weapon found its target and detonated against the enemy's reactor housing. The destroyer broke in half, its crew dying in the cold vacuum of space. "Nice shot, Commander," Jenny Parker said over the radio. Her fighter flew beside his, matching every move. "Focus on their shield generators. We need to open a path for the capital ships." The fighters dove toward the Drachma flagship, the Annihilator. It was massive, 8 kilometers of black metal and weapons platforms. It looked like a mountain floating in space. Its defensive batteries tracked the incoming fighters and opened fire. 2 Raptors vanished in balls of flame. Then 3 more. The Annihilator's defenses were too strong. "Break off attack run," Nathan ordered. "Regroup and find another approach." But Jenny's voice came over the radio, calm and determined. "Negative, Commander. I have a clear shot at their main shield generator. Covering fire, please." Before Nathan could respond, Jenny's fighter accelerated toward the flagship. Plasma bolts streaked past her. One clipped her wing, sending sparks flying. She did not slow down. "Fox 3 away," she said. Her missile launched. It flew straight and true, slipping through a gap in the defensive fire. It struck the shield generator and detonated. The explosion tore a hole in the Annihilator's defenses. Jenny's damaged fighter spiraled away from the blast. Nathan watched helplessly as she fought to regain control. For a terrible moment, he thought she was lost. But then her ship stabilized, trailing smoke but still flying. "I'm okay," Jenny said. breathing hard. Shield generator is down. You are clear for attack run. Nathan felt pride surge in his chest. Good work, Parker. All fighters, exploit that opening. Hit them with everything you have. The battle raged for hours. Ships exploded on both sides. Humans died. Drachmer died. The space around Corvani Prime became a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen bodies. The destroyer, Valor, took a direct hit to her engines. Her captain, Heather Ross, realized that her ship was crippled. She could not fight. She could not run. But she could still do one more thing. All hands, abandon ship, she ordered. Then she turned to her helmsman. Set collision course with that cruiser. The helmsman looked at her with wide eyes. Captain? Do it. The Valor's crew evacuated in escape pods as the crippled ship accelerated toward a Drachma cruiser. Heather stood alone on her bridge, guiding her ship toward its final target. The enemy tried to evade, but the Valor was too close, too fast. The collision was spectacular. Both ships vanished in a nuclear fireball that lit up the battlefield. Heather Ross died a hero. On the frigate Defiant, a Drachmer boarding party breached the hull. The alien warriors poured through the breach, their weapons ready, expecting easy kills. Instead, they found humans waiting for them. Chief Petty Officer Sam Winters stood at the front of the defensive line. He was a big man, covered in scars from a lifetime of fighting. When his rifle ran empty, he used it as a club. When that broke, he picked up a piece of metal pipe. He killed 11 Drachmer warriors before they finally brought him down. His crewmates avenged him immediately, wiping out the boarding party to the last alien. The Defiant survived, but the Drachmer flagship was still operational. Its main weapon was charging, preparing to fire at Corvani Prime. If that weapon fired, billions would die. And then the Revenant arrived. She came out of the darkness like death itself. 5 kilometers of black metal and terrible purpose. The Drachmer sensors detected her and sent warnings throughout the fleet. But it was too late. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Revenant, watching the Annihilator on his display. The enemy flagship was the largest ship he had ever seen. It was designed to inspire terror. Jake was not impressed. Main weapon charged and ready, Lavrovance reported. Target their reactor core. Targeting solution locked. Jake looked at the enemy ship. He thought about the Corvani below. He thought about the millions already dead. He thought about every species the Drachmer had ever conquered, every world they had burned, every innocent life they had taken. Fire. The Revenant's main cannon discharged. A beam of pure energy, brighter than a sun, crossed the void in an instant. It struck the Annihilator dead center, punching through its weakened shields and penetrating deep into its core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Annihilator's reactor exploded. The flagship died in a supernova of light. The blast was so powerful that it destroyed 3 nearby Drachmer ships caught in the explosion. The shock wave rippled across the battlefield, throwing smaller vessels aside like toys. The Drachmer fleet watched their flagship die. They watched their commanders burn. They watched their dreams of conquest turn to ash. And they broke. The remaining Drachmer ships began to scatter. Some tried to flee into hyperspace. Some tried to surrender. Some kept fighting out of pure desperation. But the battle was over. The humans had won. Admiral Jake Morrison looked at the retreating enemy ships and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. All ships, he said quietly, pursue and destroy. No one escapes. The galaxy needs to know what happens when you threaten our friends. The human fleet obeyed. They hunted the Drachmer across the system, destroying every ship they could catch. By the time the battle ended, over 400 enemy vessels were nothing but wreckage. The humans had lost 43 ships and thousands of lives. It was a heavy price. The Corvani Prime was saved. The fires on Corvani Prime had finally stopped burning. Admiral Jake Marson's shuttle descended through the atmosphere, passing through clouds of smoke and ash. Below him, he could see the scars of battle. Cities that had been beautiful now lay in ruins. Forests that had stood for thousands of years were nothing but blackened stumps. The ground was covered with the marks of war, but there were also signs of life. Corvani survivors emerged from their underground shelters, looking up at the sky with wonder. Human shuttles landed in open areas, bringing food, medicine, and hope. Soldiers who had been killing enemies just hours ago now carried children to safety and helped the elderly find shelter. Jake's shuttle touched down in what had once been a public park. Now it was a landing zone for rescue operations. He stepped out onto the scorched ground and looked around. Ambassador Velthari was waiting for him. The Corvani leader looked different than he had in the council chamber. His crystalline body was cracked in several places. His light seemed dimmer. He had been through his own kind of battle, watching his world burn while waiting for help that might never come. But he was alive. His people were alive. And that was what mattered. Admiral Morrison, Velthari said, his voice shaking with emotion. You came. You actually came. Jake nodded. I told you we would. The galaxy said no one would help us. They said we were too far away. They said the Drachma were too strong. They said we should accept our fate. The galaxy was wrong. Velthari stepped closer. Around them, hundreds of Corvani had gathered, watching the exchange between their ambassador and the human admiral. They looked at Jake with a mixture of fear and gratitude. To them, he was a monster who had saved them from other monsters. Why? Velthari asked. We could offer you nothing. We have no military. We have no strategic value. We are just traders and artists. Why would your people sacrifice so much for us? Jake was quiet for a moment. He thought about the ships he had lost. He thought about Captain Heather Ross, who had crashed her destroyer into the enemy rather than let them win. He thought about Sam Winters, who had fought until his last breath defending his crewmates. He thought about Jenny Parker, who had risked her life to take down the enemy's shields. He thought about all the humans who had died so that these people could live. 10 years ago, a plague hit one of our colonies, Jake said slowly. 40,000 humans were dying. No one in the galaxy would help us. They were afraid of catching the disease. They said it was too dangerous. He looked directly at Velthari. But the Corvani came. Your people sent their medical ships. Your doctors worked until they collapsed. They saved our people. They asked for nothing in return. They did it simply because it was the right thing to do. Jake's voice was steady but heavy with meaning. Humans remember. We remember the ones who helped us when we needed it most. We remember kindness. And we repay our debts, no matter what it costs. Velthari's eyes filled with tears of light. He reached out and placed his fragile hand on Jake's arm. It was a gesture of profound trust. Corvani did not touch easily. You lost so many, Velthari whispered. So many of your people died for us. That is what family does, Jake replied simply. We protect each other, even when it hurts. Even when we lose people we love. That is what it means to be human. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy watched in stunned silence as the aftermath of the battle unfolded. The Drachma Collective had been broken. Their fleet was destroyed. Their best warriors were dead. Their flagship was dust and memory. They had ruled through fear for 3 centuries, conquering species after species, taking what they wanted because no one could stop them. And then the humans had stopped them in a single day. Reports spread across every world. The Deathworlders of Sol 3 had traveled across the galaxy to fight for a species that could offer them nothing. They had faced impossible odds and won. They had lost ships and soldiers, paid a terrible price in blood, and never once considered turning back. The other species began to talk among themselves. What did this mean? What kind of creatures were these humans? Some said they were savages, bloodthirsty monsters who lived for battle. But that did not explain why they had come to help the Kovani. Savages did not risk their lives for strangers. Some said they were fools, throwing away lives for no good reason. But that did not explain why they had won. Fools did not defeat armies 3 times their size. Slowly, a different understanding began to emerge. The humans were protectors. They were fierce, yes. Dangerous beyond measure. The product of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. But that fierceness was not random violence. It was not cruelty. It was the strength of a species that had learned to fight for survival, fight for each other, fight for the things that mattered. When humans made friends, they made friends for life. When humans gave their word, they kept it. When humans said they would protect someone, they would burn down the galaxy before they let that person come to harm. The Kovani knew this now. They would never forget the humans who had died for them. Every year, they would hold a memorial for the fallen. They would teach their children about the monsters who became heroes. They would make sure the sacrifice was never forgotten. On the bridge of the Ironclad, Captain Ben Harper stood at the viewport as his ship began the long journey home. Commander Grace Sullivan joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him without a word. Outside, the stars drifted past. Beautiful and cold and infinite. Do you think they will remember this? Grace asked softly. Ben thought about the question. He thought about the Kovani looking up at the sky as human shuttles brought salvation. He thought about Velthari's tears. He thought about the way the galaxy had watched, stunned into silence by what humans were willing to do for their friends. I think they will, he said finally. I think the galaxy just learned something very important about humanity. What is that? Ben took a sip of his coffee. His eyes were distant, looking at something beyond the stars. They learned that we are not just monsters. They learned that we are loyal. They learned that we will sacrifice everything for the people we care about. And they learned that it is far better to have us as friends than as enemies. Grace nodded slowly. Do you think there will be more battles like this? More species who need our help? Probably. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There will always be predators, always be conquerors, always be those who think strength gives them the right to hurt others. He turned to look at her, and there was something fierce in his eyes. And when that happens, we will be there. Because that is who we are. That is what we do. We protect. We fight. We sacrifice. Not because we want war, but because some things are worth fighting for. The Ironclad continued her journey through the darkness, carrying her crew home. Behind her, Kovani Prime began to heal. The fires went out. The shelters opened. Life returned to a world that had been saved by monsters who turned out to be heroes. And across the galaxy, species that had once feared humanity began to see them differently. Not as threats to be avoided, but as allies to be cherished. Not as monsters, but as protectors. The Deathworlders of Sol 3 had proven something that day. They had proven that true strength was not about violence or conquest. True strength was about what you were willing to sacrifice for the ones you loved, and humans loved fiercely. The galaxy would never forget that lesson. Asterisk.